Here we go. So welcome everybody. My name is Mackenzie Wren. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the special projects manager for Sojourn. And it's my incredible pleasure to be here with you all tonight. We are doing Pathways to Progress. It is a program that is funded predominantly by the Bremen Foundation. And this is our third Pathways to Progress. We are also really thrilled that Compassion in Atlanta and 18 Doors are co-sponsors of this event. So in the interest of time, am not going to read and introduce everybody's amazing bios because it would take me an hour to share the bios of these amazing people. So I'm going to instead invite introduction through the words of our fabulous couples themselves. And our introductions for each of them is you have 45 seconds to a minute, so a nice robust time. And your question is your name, of course, and your pronouns, your relationship to the faith tradition, and something that you appreciate about your faith. And I'm going to drop that into the chat, and we are going to hear our panelists introduce themselves through this question. And whichever beautiful couple would like to kick us off, we will just start rolling.
Oh, you start. Oh, hi. I was actually volunteering her, but that's why. I'm Reverend Kim Jackson. I go by Kim. My pronouns are she and her. I am an Episcopal priest. I'm a Christian from the Christian tradition. And, I've been a professional Christian for almost 15 years of my life, which is makes my relationship, I think, to Christianity a bit different than perhaps others have. And what I particularly appreciate about being a professional Christian, about being a clergy person, is that we get to retell the story every year, kind of over and over. And I have to figure out different ways of hearing that story and of learning from that story. And so even after 15 years of like literally in the course of 3 years, we read the same lessons. I still every time come back to the sacred scriptures in a new way and learn new things. So that's one of my favorite parts of the tradition.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Trina Jackson. My pronouns are she, her, and cuz or sister, or almost any pronouns said respectfully or with love. I'm Muslim. I often refer to myself as a Pentecostal Muslim because I believe in the spirit. One of my favorite parts, two of my favorite parts of Islam, of the Islamic traditions, is that Islam really respect. Oh, thank you, Ramadan, or Eid Mubarak, Eid Kareem. Yay! Yesterday was Eid al-Adha, the weekend. Thank you. Our big Eid. I really appreciate that Islam really embraces reason. The Quran often talks about like being people having reason. Allah really respects us as reasonable creatures, beings. And Islam is also incredibly erotic. And so I really appreciate that it's a very reasoning, rational faith tradition because my background is science. And so I appreciate that Allah calls us to like think a lot and analyze a lot. And it's also a very erotic and praxis oriented religion. So that's what I love about Islam. Thanks.
And this is Khalil. Dave, he'll probably sleep the whole time.
And who is this little person? You want to introduce them?
Yeah, so Khalil is how 3 months old, almost 3 months old. And then he has a bigger brother who's 3, who hopefully will not make a cameo during this time.
Beautiful. Welcome to both of you all. Which couple would like to introduce themselves next?
You start. Hey there, my name's Darcy Jarrett. I am affirmed by they, them pronouns, and I am a Christian pastor. And I like how Reverend Kim said professional Christian. I am 5 years into my professional Christianisms. Um, but and I'm gonna use like the um opportunities kind of language. I find my tradition to be very praxis oriented. And I think there's a large opportunity to invite my community and many communities to begin a process of sort of undoing empire dominant culture Christianity. And really that's making places for couples like us and many more broadly people. And so that opportunity for me is one of the big reasons why I'm a clergy person.
I'm Amy. I use she, her pronouns. And thank you also for putting the question in the chat. I realized I was listening. So if it would be possible to put the questions for us in the chat, like each time, that would be super helpful because I keep listening and then forgetting what the question is. So I am Jewish, and what comes to mind for me, something that you appreciate about your faith, I think the two things that come to mind are like the depth of like meaning that can be found in community and community building in Jewish community. And I don't know, maybe this is more morbid than y'all's answers, but I think something that has always like been with me a long time that I found very, very useful is the way Judaism teaches and relates to death and mourning, which I think is kind of a unique aspect of it. Also, it seems like we have a filter on our screen that I just realized our 9-year-old put on when he was using my Zoom for a homeschool class this morning. So while everyone else is talking, I might see if I can get that off.
No worries. At least you don't like have kitty ears or mustaches. So you're good. It's not distracting at all.
Borrow that they don't have bunny ears and teeth. Never do. Well, I started.
Carry on. Yeah.
So, Mercy Packer Monroe. I use they, them pronouns or she, her. I'm a pastor in the United Church of Christ, and my professional Christianity takes place in a secular setting in the hospital. I work in palliative care as a chaplain. And there's so many ways that I could be with this question about kind of what's meaningful and calls to me about my faith. And we'll have time. I think that will come out in a lot of ways, but certainly not unique to Christianity, but I love the simplicity of the call to eat with one another, to serve one another, to investigate our shared pursuit of healing, justice, student of human connection. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Malka Packer Monroe, and I use she or they. And yeah, it was like I could spend the whole hour talking about this question, so I'm trying to think of how to simplify it. So one thing to share about myself is I work for an organization called 18 Doors, and I work with couples and families and interfaith relationships where one person identifies as Jewish. So a lot of the work I do is creating inclusive, welcoming, celebratory spaces for couples who are traditional in many forms, and that looks different in many different settings. And something I appreciate about my faith, I think, is just like the questioning nature of Judaism. That it's a lot of questioning, it's a lot of exploration, it's a lot of different interpretations, and that I think allows for a lot of creativity when it comes to understanding texts and traditions and rituals. And part of why I became a rabbi was to take the traditions and really make them relevant and meaningful. And for people who are feeling like, it feels a little raw or stale, how do we bring some life into it? Some ways to connect with the divine and with each other through that practice.
Beautiful. Thank you to all 6 or actually 7 of you here, our beautiful panelists and families. And we're going to keep on diving deeply with you all. And again, the beauty of you being willing to share your stories and the truth of yourselves is a little bit about like y'all as family, right? So your it actually says cute meat. It should be meet cute, but your meet cute story, like let's hear it. And then like a little bit about your own family to the extent that you're willing to share. And then we'll begin to dive in the questions, but the rooting in some of the meet cute and the sense of you all as a family, if you are willing to share that with us, that would be lovely. And so again, whoever would like to start us off, you can do the couple switch it off thing, or one person can speak on behalf of the couple, as you like to handle this question. Let's hear a little bit about the meet cute.
Okay, I got a fun one. Ready? So we had a lot of friends in common, and Amy lived, although she's from here, lived out of state at the time when we very first met. And I went up to her we had a friend in common, and I had that friend, I asked about her. And Amy became frustrated with the friend having to ask that question to her, I guess. And then we sat like at a booth at a small coffee shop at a show that our friends were having. It was all queer folks. Like it was really the right scene to meet my future wife. And she sat like 2 feet from me and didn't even like look at me. It wasn't even really awkward. She was just like, you don't exist. And I was just like, I guess I don't exist now. But and I didn't remember that had happened until later we met and had been on several dates. And I mean, maybe 4 years later, maybe I would have never remembered. And then she told me, and I was like, oh my gosh. Thankfully, that didn't crush my spirit.
I love it. That is a good meet cute for sure. Do you want to share a little bit about your family structure?
Sure. We have a multi-faith, multi-ethnic blended family, and extended family too, which I love. We have 3 little ones, 2 more recently sojourning with us, and as well as my oldest second cousin, who is my cousin's child, and she is my cousin. She's my baby and the closest thing to a sister. And so we live in a house that's just big enough for all of us and our 3 cats.
Oh, thank you.
Not inside.
We can jump in. Go ahead. Okay. So we met when I was in my final year of rabbinical school. I was in an interview process to work at a Jewish institution. I was a finalist there. I didn't know anyone in that city. It was a little intimidating. And I had a friend who had lived there, and she's like, let me connect you with some friends so I can show you around. And so she wrote an email that said, dear queers, Jews, and Jewish queers, my friend who's a rabbinical student in town, who can show her around. I can't recall the other details. And Mercy responded. And like, so this was not meant to be a date or a match or anything. This was just like, who's going to show me around this city that I've never been to before?
And those of you who know me well know that I have difficulty returning an email, let alone like a mass email. So it was, it caught my attention, and hearing that she was a rabbinical student, and at the time I was in seminary, and I thought we might have some stuff in common. So we had this shared acquaintance, friend, and we basically, the time that we had to meet up kept getting shorter and shorter. And I'm from the South, so it's like, you know, there's like time, space, and words take a long time. And so we literally, like, the time kept getting whittled down from her end.
to like 30 minutes. And I was like, this was an intensive, like 4-day interview process with like interviews and dinners and like everything.
And I was like, what can we do in 30 minutes? You know? So long story short, took it on as a challenge. We had a really delightful wintry walk in Minnesota, a sculpture garden. We hit it off.
It was winter solstice, so we talked about winter solstice, and I was about to lead a Havdalah service for the end of Shabbat that night to show that I could do that, and talked about becoming queer spiritual leaders. And
I was like, tell me about your Havdalah service.
it was pretty good. Oh yeah, so then we got married and had 2 kids.
Oh yes, we have almost.
Oh yeah, that.
And we'll probably talk more about them as we talk about life cycle stuff. But
Awesome. Thank you. Trina and Kim.
Yeah, so Trina and I met in graduate school, and our first date we did not know was a date. There was a group of folks from, we went to Emory, and there was a group that went to a one-woman play. Yeah, it was a one-woman play in Little Five Points, and you know, it was probably like 7 or 8 people. I don't know. It was a nice little group that my friend had organized for us. And after the play was over, I was like, hey, we should go grab a bite to eat. And everybody looked around and was like, no, I'm good. And like, before I know it, the only person that's left who was willing to go to dinner was Trina, which apparently was the setup. Like, that was the plan all along. But we didn't know. And so we had our first like date at the IHOP on Claremont, which is no longer open, I don't think, but it was the queerest IHOP in the city. Like, everybody who worked there was super queer. And it was just like, it was really beautiful and a really great setup. And so, yeah, that's where it started.
I wasn't convinced for a while until she said, "Plan a garden with me." So we've been dating for probably semi-dating, because I refused to be her girlfriend because I had a harem. So I refused to be her girlfriend for like several months. I had girlfriends, so I didn't want one. And then she said, "Plan a garden with me." And I was like, oh, country girl got some skills, because we're both from the country. And we have planted a garden together for 16 years, every year. And now we have 2 children, because a year ago, next week, somebody walked up to us in a park and said, hey, will you hold this baby? And they never came back. That's how we got our son, Reese. And about 3 months ago, the same people called us and said, this woman is pregnant again with a baby, come and get it. So that's how we got Khalil. And that's how we became parents about 11 months ago.
Very old parents.
Yes, but we also have a very large farm with lots of animals. So we've been raising kids, i.e. goats, for quite a while.
Thank you all. And before we, well, it's all right. We can bring Trina and Kim back on for a second, and they can take this and follow on with this. Is really the whole conversation. You all have already tapped into some of this. It's like, oh, Mercy said I was interested because Malka was a rabbinical student and Mercy was in seminary, right? And so there's this sort of like, ooh, interest across, across faith. I'm involved in my faith, and I'm curious as to who this person is. And so I would like for you all to talk about your own faith journeys as queer people. Faith, we know faith traditions can push us out, right? Push us out completely. And so I would love to hear a little bit about creating faith spaces that accept you as you are. And you can talk about that in however you want to take that on, but really that your own journey to finding your place in your faith as queer people, alone and together.
Sure, I guess it's to some extent an extension of our Meet Cute story. Is we started organizing together in graduate school. And so one of the ways that we got closer
is we were doing some organizing around Troy Davis and dropping banners and doing some different work around some larger anti-death penalty campaign work, Georgians for alternatives to the death penalty, and then kind of some national work. And we were out in the middle of the night dropping banners and stuff, and we were like, hey, we should get to know each other better in case we get arrested. We need to get our story straight. That's how we started getting to know each other really well. We should get our story straight in case we get arrested because we're out here in the middle of the night doing illegal shit. And so that was one of the ways we started to grow together, and learn who is this person, what are your politics, what is your faith that's driving these politics, right? Because we were both in seminary, although we were studying different degrees, and both of us were clear that our political pursuits were a part of what our faith demanded of us, right? And I'll let you tell your story about how you came from the Baptist church to the Episcopal church. In my own journey, I grew up Christian. I grew up Pentecostal, but in a mystical tradition. It wasn't terribly dogmatic in the way I think I've learned that many people grew up in Pentecostal traditions. It was actually a pretty mystical experience, a fairly small sect of Pentecostalism, which made my transition to Islam pretty smooth. I think if I had not grown up with that kind of mystical experience, I wouldn't have known what was happening in my reversion moment. And so I'm like, God knew I was queer, like before this moment, before becoming a Muslim. So it's not complicated, right? It's not a complicated moment. I was a queer Christian, so I'm a queer Muslim, but it became complicated moving back to the South. My first career was of an archaeologist, so I kind of traveled around and I didn't have to have a permanent home community. But when I came back to the South, it was really hard to find a Black, which really was important to me, a Black religious community, a progressive religious community, and an Islamic religious community. I could find Black and Muslim, I could find progressive and Black, but I couldn't find Black, progressive, and Muslim. So I had to be a part of creating it. And so the Atlanta Unity Mosque is not all Black, but it was a part of creating a community where I didn't have to check any of my identities at the door, right? I started off as a community that was the Atlanta Islamic Fellowship. We're about 20 years old. We transitioned to the Muslims for Progressive Values, the chapter of Muslims for Progressive Values, which is a national group here in the US. And around 2015, when we had some disagreement with that organization around actually dealing with anti-Blackness, that organization was not yet ready to deal with after the killing of George Floyd. That organization was not ready to deal with kind of the wave of folks dealing with anti-Blackness in the country. And so we moved on and joined a larger coalition of what are called unity mosques around the world. The most famous, I think, or in this hemisphere, the most famous, I think, is the Toronto Unity Mosque. And we broke off to make our own Atlanta Unity Mosque. And we're the largest in this part of the country. And so I'm an imam, a co-imam with Imam Kelly Wentworth, who was a white woman, a white queer woman. And so we're one of the few mosques that are led by queer women in the world. And so we had to create our space because there wasn't a space where I could bring my whole self in this part of the country. And I'll just say, really briefly for my own journey, I was raised very Baptist and very Black Baptist, kind of country small church, where my call was not, I felt called to ministry at age 8, and it was not recognized because I was a girl. And that was what he said to me when I told him. And I said, no, not as a girl. When I become a woman, I want to be a pastor. Because I was a literalist at the time. And he again said that was not welcome. So when I went to college and then on to seminary, I had to find a place that would welcome me both as a woman and then, as also a queer woman and as a Black woman, right? Like as a Black queer woman, those 3 identifiers, because I could have gone and been UCC or something like that. Back in the early aughts, that wasn't a place that felt like was necessarily the best place for a Black woman. So that didn't seem like an option. And I don't know if it was true that the Episcopal Church really was the best place either, but there was a Black Episcopal Church in Atlanta that was incredibly welcoming and open and just welcomed me as my whole self. And I brought my Muslim girlfriend, with me to that church. And I think for them, it was actually like a badge of honor or something. I don't, it was, I mean, in some ways it's tokenism, right? But like they found it interesting. It made them, it added another progressive badge to.
The music was really good.
The music was very good. That's why she came. But it added another progressive badge to them that they had this Black queer, woman seminarian and priest who was, married to a Muslim. That just made it all work. And so I was really clear that I couldn't check or hide my identities. I am who I am. And I needed to find a place that would welcome that and welcome me as my full self. And the Episcopal Church has been that for me.
Thank you both so much. There's so much that's juicy in there. Sojourn exists because in the South, we know that having our full authentic selves in the South is in some ways more complicated than in other parts of the country. And so those three boxes, like wanting the religion, wanting a progressive, wanting Muslim, wanting Black, how do we create or find? And you said it, we had to create what we wanted, right? And that is so often that experience. And so with that creating what you need and want, let me turn it over to Amy and Darcy to share some of that. There's a similar thread that runs through y'all's relationship as well.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm in love with that story about you guys getting your story straight. That's Kim like spinning some game, I think. Just try to get to know someone who's yeah, I adore that story. And I wish that was our story. No. But when we met, I was in a place of trying to kind of smush myself into the Christian little box that I thought was appropriate for me. And in so many ways, um just Amy has accepted and loved me through all of that. And so yeah, my journey of coming, back to the Christian faith. I was raised in the Catholic tradition. But my story of coming back to depending on that faith and then eventually feeling a call to ministry is a lot through addiction, through homelessness, um and so I was just like desperately holding on to the community that I happened to go to, and I went to that community because the shelter where I lived, that's where everyone went, and it was a Baptist church, and it thankfully was moderate Baptist church, and I love the sort of healthy tokenism. I was their sort of healthy tokenized queer person that worked in the front office and did their outreach ministry, and they loved me. I mean, they did. And I had a place there. And when I tried to reintroduce myself to this person, it was like, I'm a lesbian and I'm gonna go to seminary. And it was like, certainly me, not not disingenuous to me. But I've done those late night radical things too, and that wasn't the point that I was at. And so in many, many ways, Amy, and us coming to know each other has been a coming to know myself too, and beginning to know, again and again, the radical tradition that I am in, although there are many, many versions of it out there. And so yeah, thinking about places to be in my faith, you know coming to the faith community that we started in. Gosh, even just thinking about us doing these kind of interviews, I'm like, I remember the tension and the feelings of like protectiveness that I had bringing Amy into Christian spaces because of embedded anti-Semitism and embedded ideas of supersessionist theologies and yeah, I mean, I had some tense conversations with some pastors at certain points, like, hey, you can't say that. Or here's what my family hears when you say this. And I think I've grown in my gracefulness with those conversations, but I certainly don't back off of them. And I am so grateful to have found someone who is as committed to living in the principles of their faith as I am, and we hold each other to that. And so it was that, yeah, growing into that and always growing forward with that. Right now, the place where I am a co-pastor is a radical Christian space, and we do our best and continue to journey toward decolonizing this faith and all of the ways that looks like. I mean, part of the reason why we know and adore the Jackson family is that Kim and I have put ourselves in some situations in the name of standing with and standing for folks that are in revolt because of police violence. And so it's funny because sometimes the stories come out and Amy's like, you haven't told me that yet. But yeah, so really not just talking about principles, not just saying pretty words about principles, but living in that has been something that I know, being partnered with Amy and how she lives her faith and how she lives holds me to that, and we are constantly inspiring each other in that way, I hope. Tell us about you.
So, yeah, thank you everybody who shared so far. Trina, I really related to a lot of what you had to say. I want to like kind of call us back to like the framing of the question is like your journey as a queer person. And I don't know, I don't want to make any assumptions about like what queer means to any of us, but to me, queerness is a legacy. It's a legacy of heartbreak and riot and defending those on the margins. It's a legacy from before my time. ACT UP. My time is universal health care instead of marriage equality. My time is Black Lives Matter over same time period, marriage equality. And for me, I have not felt nearly as marginalized by like within Judaism by my gayness as by my queerness. For me, standing with the marginalized, truly looking your neighbor in the eye and loving that neighbor, I am an anti-Zionist Jew. And that puts me out of almost every Jewish community in Atlanta. So listening to Trina talk about build it, the way y'all built it, that has only kind of just happened for us here. I am deeply honored to be a convener of Jewish Voice for Peace's Atlanta's Chavurah space, which is a Jewish community that really rests on the principle that it is possible to be Jewish and to be anti-Zionist. So that, I mean, really getting to participate in building this space, one that is so wanted here in Atlanta, in the South, in a community where, I mean, there are more than 100 of us who have shown up and said, this matters. We are here. We don't want to give up on this faith tradition.
That's it.
We're not willing to give up, even though there are a lot of people who are actively pushing us out, silencing us and calling us anti-Semitic. That to me is absolutely inextricable from my journey as a queer Jewish person.
Thank you. I want to before I turn it to Amalka and Mercy, that essence of that I heard in Trina, and certainly heard in you, Amy, and from all of y'all, is like excavating the tradition for like some of the deepest truths, right? Like that, excavating the tradition and not accepting kind of like the mainstream presentation of the traditions, but really finding what is essential. I heard Trina speak about that, and I heard Kim say that as well. And I definitely heard that within what you were saying as well, Amy, like these essential pieces. So let's hold that and come back to that as well while we hear from Malka and Mercy.
Usually Malka's computer is a little awkward for me. I'll speak to my faith journey as a queer person. Can you, somebody else out there? Can you guys hear me? I'm hearing some feedback, so maybe there's a, yeah. Hey.
Yeah, keep on going. I think everybody's muted now. I'm not sure what that was, but you're good. You should be good now, Malka. I have Mercy, sorry.
Yeah, I also just want to thank you all. This is kind of my dream come true, to be with folks, you know, where we have some resonance, and to hear your stories and how you came to be. And I mean, that's what I do all day, because I'm deeply curious about it, and love to hear what people hold sacred and how it informs their lives. I came up in the Southern Baptist tradition. It's pretty hostile towards women, as you lifted up, Kim, similar tradition. Hostile to a lot of folk, I would say. And it is where I encountered God and Jesus, and had just deeply beautiful spiritual experiences. It's a deep way that I connect with my family and my ancestors. Christianity is just, and kind of the language of faith. It is a deep root in my family. And so as I kind of came of age and you know, almost didn't survive that type of environment, you know, I had to really cut some ties and get some space, find some safety, and you know, that's been its own sort of brought its own kind of layers of beauty, and mine is a Christianity that's been, you know, deepened and forged by, you know, Buddhism and witchy pagan spaces, and certainly like my queer chosen family who saved my life. And the way that I found my kind of my way back to church and affiliating with Christianity, there was this activist bent of like, you know, again, some resonance of like, this is my birthright. It's something that I know to be mine. You know, I've felt very hurt and disappointed by God's people, but luckily I never felt betrayed by God, and felt, you know, deeply loved and cherished, and propelled is a word I would use to speak out to the suffering that the church causes, and so many different types of suffering. And I think that's what keeps me in the church, honestly. Like continued wrestling. Like I love, there's so much beauty to be had. There's so much possibility, and there's so much reckoning that still needs to be had. So yeah, there's a lot I could say there, but I too felt called to ministry at an early age, but had to, walk through some fires and, grapple with gender and wander quite a bit. And it was a very powerful moment of sort of stepping into this path very intentionally and yeah, having opportunities kind of open up and arise for me.
So I was raised in the conservative Jewish movement in upstate New York. So it's like upper and lowercase c conservative, and was very, very into religion. Loved God. I wrote God love notes when I was a kid. Like I loved youth group. I loved going to synagogue. I loved prayer. I loved holidays. Like I loved all of it. And then when I was in college is when I just started questioning God, and I didn't have anyone to help me with that exploration. Like I didn't feel comfortable with the rabbi on campus. I didn't feel like there's anyone to talk to about like, wait, I don't believe in my childhood God, so now what? Like I don't know how to create a new theology. And I just started questioning religion in general, but especially Judaism. And I was like, wow, you know what? Judaism is really like misogynistic and homophobic and non-inclusive, and like look what's going on in Israel. Like I just like this isn't working for me. And so my like not fully formed brain, I just didn't know how to deal with all of this. I didn't have the resources, and I rejected religion for a decade. Like I moved to San Francisco, I came out, and long story short, like found the queer synagogue and the hippie dippy synagogue, and it's like, oh, these are my people. Like this prayer service feels authentic and real, and like, here are some queers doing Judaism, and look, they changed the prayer service, and look, they changed the God language, and look, they changed this like so much that like made it meaningful that I was like, oh, this feels right. And that's where I started to feel acceptance of who I was on such a deep, profound level. Like the rabbi was a lesbian, this one synagogue, and then I found the other lesbian rabbi, and like it was just like little by little, I was like, oh, these people are like, and they were questioning all kinds of things I didn't even know we were allowed to question. And so that was really my journey to come back into Judaism and find life in it. And I've been working as an educator for years, and I just remember being at this like, I don't know, ecstatic prayer service, and I was like, I think I'm supposed to be a rabbi. It was kind of shocking and weird, but felt really right. And my family was completely surprised. They're like, remember when you rejected Judaism for a decade? Like, what's this? And it felt so clear, and I kept listening to it. And that's part of what I see as my calling, is to help create those spaces where people can see themselves in that space, not just for people who do Judaism in this one particular way, which is how I was raised. I didn't see anything else. I didn't see queer people in my Jewish community growing up. I didn't see women leaders in the way that I do now. I just didn't know anything. I knew like one woman who was a song leader. She was very famous. But that's it. Like I just didn't know anything. And so being exposed to that in the Bay Area, it's just like mind blowing. And I meet people all the time who are like, oh, I didn't know women could be rabbis. Oh, I didn't know queer people could be rabbis. Wait, what's this? Like I wear a kippah or a yarmulke on my head. They're like, oh, I didn't know women could wear that. Like, I'm blowing minds just by walking down the street, like especially in Atlanta. Like so many people are like, what is this like little rainbow hat on your head? So I'm educating every day. So I just walk on the street. And I don't know, it's just something else that comes up for me in this question is like, as a femme cis woman, my queerness is very invisible on a daily basis as well. So like my Jewishness is is kind of seen by me wearing this, and sometimes I wear a Jewish star or something, but my queerness is like, even if I wear rainbow earrings or I have a rainbow sticker on my water bottle, people don't see it. So that's a layer that I also am very, my invisible identity, or like my I don't know, like I can have a whole conversation just about all of my identities and my privilege around that as well.
So I'm curious for all y'all, yay, all y'all, in thinking about, did any of you ever think, oh, I want to find my same faith person who is equally into religion? And was it a reach, right? To find that the person who was your person is across a religion. And Amy, I saw you give a big smile, so you wanna take that one?
Well, I'm laughing because my mom is on this call. I don't know if she's still here actually. She was at least earlier. So I believe I rebelled against every single thing Jewish from roughly ages 12 to 23/40. Um and I don't remember. I'm gonna mischaracterize this conversation because I don't fully remember it, but at some point I think my mom said something along the lines of like I it really is okay if you don't marry a Jewish person or something along those lines. But like what she was saying was like kind of radical for the time and place. And I remember just being like, well, I wasn't going to anyways.
Well, okay, and just like this was the early 2000, the 2010s when we met, and it was still like, okay, I had to come out, to all my queer friends as Christian, and they're like, oh my gosh, are you going to change how you feel about us, and I was just like, so I mean, I'm still it's funny, I'm still having some of those conversations, but yeah, I mean, in 2010 it was like, so here's my caveat, like, I'm nice, I'm into the same things as you, but I'm Christian, like,
No,
uh
but I found it
but
easier to relate to someone who
well,
had a
right,
religion than
and then
didn't.
going to Amy,
Yeah.
she was like, oh, well, I get that, because my orientation is, I grew up very religious in a different way. But I've had a lot of conversations actually with some of the folks in your congregation, Imam Trina. One of my oldest friends who I went to high school with is in your congregation. And we've talked about what it was like to be activists in the 2000s in Atlanta and try to have a faith tradition. And it just wasn't a thing. I mean, I spent a lot of time in like Georgia Peace and Justice Coalition kind of Quaker circles, so like Quaker was fine. And it's funny because Amy's other friend that was on the call went to the Quaker college that she went to, and so like Quakers were cool, because they weren't going to try to do anything to you. um but but I really liked, the meditation part, and I mean, I think I liked the Jesus part, even though there was never any of that out front, but it was not, it wasn't a place to be a Christian. If you were, we were doing Spark Reproductive Justice now, activist work back in the day. There was just no, you know, my conversation with Angela Davis after she came and spoke was like never ever going to mention that I was a Christian. Like, I just, that wasn't a part of me really actively in that point, but nor would it have been, I feel like, accepted in the community. Now, I think it's a different time now. And it's my friend is Sonali in your congregation. We've talked about it, but Sonali and I have talked now, and it's like, yeah, we feel that that it's a different place now, that people are seeking faith traditions and maybe seeing it in the similar way to what Amy saw, which is like, oh my gosh, you're a person that makes meaning. And okay, like we can get down on that deeper level. And there's something bigger guiding our actions. And that's the big thing, is like, um, I love the way Trina said it, that my faith compels me to action. And that's what it, that's, I can get that. I get that with with the ways that Amy operates in the world.
So when you said about like coming out as Christian, like all four of the other couples' heads were just like nods, yes, yes, yes. And Trina and Kim, do you want to like share some of that for you all, and what was happening for you all around that?
Oh no, that I was just vibing with some of the things that Reverend Darcy was saying about like people. I'm like, I'm wearing hijab. Like, I know I'm a Black woman in Atlanta, and this could mean anything. Like, it just mean I'm wrapping up my hair today. Because sometimes I definitely do like the Clara Muhammad look. I'd like, it could mean anything for a Black woman in Atlanta. And so people do have this moment of hesitation when they don't know that I'm Muslim. Well, I feel like I'm pretty open and clear and kind of hijab identified, but and like because it's like a political statement, you know. But people do have a moment of pause, I think, and even withdraw and ask questions about, okay, it's okay if you're queer because we're down with that in progressive and rad community, but what kind of Muslim are you? Like, do you actually believe that stuff? Like, and like, what are you devoted to Islam? Or are you just like culturally Muslim? You were raised that way, and so people want to interrogate what do you mean when you say you're Muslim? Like, but I do think that Reverend Darcy is right that there's been a shift in leftist movement from we are starkly secular, and on another day we can have a whole conversation about how big of a mistake that has been on the left side of the political spectrum of not taking religion, faith, and faith identity seriously, and that's part of how we got where we are right now, because the right took it at least seriously enough. That there's a lot of power on the right because of taking people's religious identity seriously. But I think that we moved to a place because it is about meaning making. And so people are actively seeking out folks like us who sit at these intersections of understanding queerness. Because you know who ain't got nothing to lose? It's folks who have had to go through in their minds, what will happen if I come out to my family, if I come out to my job, if I tell them who I truly am? Because in Georgia, they can still fire you. Like, you can still lose your livelihood. Like, you can still lose your family. You can still lose your life. And so the best evangelists you'll ever find is people who have already taken a calculation of those things and decided they're going to be who they are anyway, in spite of that. And so much of our political movement now is about people who understand how to make meaning, how to make ways out of no ways. And people are brokenhearted right now. And so they're looking for people like us who've already done those calculations and are living in that interstitial place, who know how to navigate those literal spaces. And they're looking for folks to hold containers. And so it's a beautiful space. Like, we had to suffer through the fog, but now it's a beautiful space, especially for clergy, because we know how to hold those containers. And so as a queer person, as a Muslim person, as a Black person, as a person who, as a disabled person, as people who sit in all of those reviled spaces, now folks are looking for us to say, how do we live? How do we make it when we are marginalized too, right? And so a moment is happening, a shift is happening in our society. And it's not necessarily a moment of victory. I think it's a moment of opening, al-Fatiha. It's a moment of opening for all of us. It's a moment of mutual liberations. And which is, again, back to what Amy was saying, is a moment for us to remember our queer lineage. The question is, does it matter that I was a Christian? Oh, I mean, it mattered, but she's not like those other Christians. Like, she's not like she's Episcopalian, so she's Christianish, right? She's Christianish. And so it matters insofar as she's a dominant religion. So I'm more of a risk for her than she is for me, you know? And so she's Christianish. You are Christian. I believe your faith is real. But so it mattered, but it was more of a risk for her than it was for me. So, yeah. I think, the life that I envisioned for myself was, being like a heterosexual person who like grew up to be a school teacher and coach basketball, which was, sign number one of my lesbianism. But like when all of that gets pulled away and you realize that childhood thing that you imagined, because that's the only picture you had of what was possible, right? That wasn't something that could be true. I think all the other constraints moved away too, right? So like the vision of like a heterosexual Christian husband who, kiss dating goodbye, because that's the tradition I grew up in, like, kiss dating goodbye and courted me instead of instead of dating, like all of that just kind of fell away when I realized that I was queer. And I think it also all fell away when I realized that I was very, very clear that I was called to ministry. No matter what my church said, they were wrong. Like I knew that in my heart of hearts, I knew they were wrong. And so it was like, well, what else is wrong? Right. Like I think it just kind of all those constraints fell away. And so, Trina being Muslim was never really an issue. I felt like, so I had game, y'all. So like I took a class in like Islamic studies in graduate school to like, prove to her that like I'm really in this. Like I really did a lot of work. But I think the one thing though that did matter to me, and I did not know this until I realized we had it, was that we have a shared culture when it comes to African American religious music. Mm-hmm. And that has meant so much to me in those hard times. It was like just in those spaces of grief and mourning, the fact that like, I can line an old hymn and, Trina calls me Miss Sue when I start singing like that, but she knows those words too. If we didn't have that, I don't know, it would be a lot more difficult. So I'm grateful for that shared tradition. It is the Christian tradition, but it's actually broader than that. It's not, it's the African American spiritual tradition, right? Like it is an ancestral connection that we share that really transcends the words of the song and goes deeper into the fortitude, the resilience, the grit, the amazingness that is the African American tradition. That connects us. I think it would have been harder for me to marry somebody who did not have that connection than it is to be married to somebody who's not Christian.
I really appreciate that so much. Like, what is that again, coming back to some of those core things. And I'm curious because a lot of times when couples, get into a rough place, it's the faith, right, that people come back to try and get through it. And if the faith is different, how might you navigate that if you're bumping up against different faith traditions? I don't know. I think if that's not a good question, we can dismiss that. But I heard you all say, that it's the African American music and that experience as Black women, right? And the traditions. And so how does faith hold you when you're bumping up against each other's faith traditions or beliefs? Malka, you just muted. She's like, I'm not doing that one.
We were ready for the last question, but not the future question.
And again, if we can, throw away that question if it doesn't feel like something that's real alive.
No,
go ahead.
I would say oftentimes, particularly as a pastor, people will say like, how can you be married? How can you be unequally yoked? That's very Christian, traditional language. How can you be married to somebody who's not a Christian? And I'm really clear, different faiths, same God. And, Trina and I pray together every night. And, we pray to the same God, different access points. Like I think about it a lot in that way of like how I reach the divine is often through the story of Jesus Christ. It helps that also, Muslims do honor Jesus as a prophet and recognize the stories that are told in our sacred scriptures as instructional, right? But for me, it's just multiple pathways, and we get to the same place. It's the same God, a God who is a God of love, a God of hope, and I think we just have a deep commitment to staying in the muck and the mud with each other, believing that God is there with us, and yes, like our shared cultural identity as Black women from the South, who are like deeply steeped and rooted in kind of Southern Black culture, that that in of itself is perhaps a faith in and of itself, right? But fundamentally for us, it's the same God. And I am grateful that Trina can access God in a different pathway. Because when my pathways are all like mucked up and I can't get to God, because I'm a professional Christian and that has its own complications. When my pathways are blocked, Trina has traditions that I borrow from, right? That I get to lean into, that can open me up to encountering God in a way that I just can't do because Christianity has been very colonized, and because sometimes I hate it, and many times I'm very mindful of that it's created into this thing that really wasn't for me, right? And so I'm glad that I can sometimes lean on Trina's traditions and a greater spirituality to access God in those moments.
I just want to be clear that I've been engaged in a very long-term mission of seductive evangelism, so that at some point, she will also be Muslim. But it's, a 30-year plan. Like she'll get there, but but I'm working on it. It's a seductive evangelism. It's slow, but it'll work. But but I also think that, she speaks, we're farmers together. Like, so much of our spirituality, we work out together in farming, right? We go out and grow things together and experience that miracle together. We're growing children, right? But like I often say that we don't actually grow anything. We try to create conditions that are conducive to growth, right? And that's what we do as clergy. We don't make miracles happen. We don't make anything happen. We try to create conditions that are conducive to miracles, to people's growth, to transformation. And so that's what we do here on the land. That's what we do in our home. That's what we try to do in our respective worship spaces. And that's what we try to do here. That's what we try to, when we talk about sex and sexuality and eroticism, like, we're not having sex all the time, but we try to create conditions that are conducive to lovemaking, right? Like, we try to create conditions that are conducive, right? And so there's a way that we lean into the spirituality, the disciplines that we learn from spirituality, is that we make ourselves ready. And so that is across lots of traditions where we practice the disciplines together, where we create conditions, right? So when Ramadan and Lent overlap, we have Ramadan or Lent, right? Or when Ramadan moves back and intersects with Christmas, we will have Eidmas, and the kids will get all the things, right? And so, like, I don't understand the problem, like, because I would rather give my kids as many religious, faith, and spiritual technologies as we can, right? So that they can choose whatever they need. They have a wide buffet, a smorgasbord, anything that they need to connect to the universe, versus saying you can only pick one or two. You have all the choices your parents can give you and more.
Beautiful. Thank you. Malka and Mercy. Malka, you want to go back to the question that you wanted to lean into for a second there?
Yeah. Go ahead. I think I'm not sure which question I'm responding to, but one thing I wanted to lift up is we really, connected over shared values, kind of similar to what's been shared, but like Malka and I were each raised in pretty, I'll use the word cloistered religious spaces. So we had a deep sense of our religious identity. We, obviously had our own struggles with our religious spaces and had to find new homes. But it was a unique journey to kind of find someone who could also find value in a queer person who could find value in these ancient religions, and I was going to make a joke about, like, when I was in my 20s, I like hung out at church with 60-year-olds, like the old queens. I went to this very queer church and they were like my mamas. They would they literally, held me when I wept when I came back to church. And so it's like, it's kind of hard to find a date when you're out of church with a 60-year-old. I didn't have trouble because I really did compartmentalize, but it was like, that was a whole journey of kind of coming to that wholeness, which has been talked about. But you know, we really did relate over like our parents are people who really valued our religious education. They oriented around, you know, building lives that were informed by spiritual and religious values. And when we were kind of talking about what we wanted for our lives, that was something that we were able to kind of see in one another.
Well, I think another thing that stood out for me is, you know, I dated a bunch of people over the years, and I could find a lot of queer Jews who were into the cultural pieces of Judaism, but not into the spiritual pieces. So it was hard to find someone who would talk about God, because in Judaism, I don't know, this is like an over like simplified statement, but like we talk about there's one God, and we believe in this very specific God, and we don't believe in the other theologies. We don't talk about God, right? Like I don't know. That was my experience growing up. Like we never talked about God in Jewish day school. My parents never talked about God. Like that was never a topic. And as I grew older and really was exploring God and a personal relationship with a higher power, it was hard to find people I was dating who cared about that, who wanted to practice religion in a deeper way. And so to find someone who's like, oh yeah, like I love religion. I love talking about God. I love praying before meals out loud. And not just using codified prayer, but like prayer from the heart. And I love playing around with ritual and like, yeah, let's do Shabbat every week. That's awesome. Oh, you're on vacation? I'm going to light some candles anyways, even if you're not home. You feel good?
It's like I truly have a Shabbat practice now. It's like, and we're raising these children who are learning, and it's like, and it's so dear. It's like, of course, when mommy's not here, we're gonna do Shabbat. Shabbat is the best. We get to drink juice and eat challah, and you know, why would we skip that? Absolutely.
And that was what drew me. So yeah, these practices are important to you. They're important to me. They're important to creating a family. You know, pre-kids at least, we used to meditate together every morning. That was important for us. It's still important, but it's hard to have two kids. We're little and exhausting. So it's not because we don't care about the practice, it's because we care about sleep. But
Everybody else.
yeah, I don't need to explain that one.
Well, and I just want to say too, I think we both really value 12-step community and the ways that faith is expressed uniquely, and I think that is a lot of our shared language when we get down to it, you know. Yeah.
And another thing that I wanted to uplift today too is like the differences in our communities around queerness and interfaithness, right? So like in my community growing up, like no one talked about being gay. It wasn't really talked about as not being okay, but it's definitely like microaggressions. Like I just remember my grandmother like talking about her hairdresser, right? Like using the words that are derogatory about the hairdresser and doing the little motions and you know, just things that were said, but it was nothing like explicit, like don't be gay or like that message wasn't there, but don't marry someone who's not Jewish was loud. That was a loud message growing up. And you can't marry someone who's not Jewish, especially Christian. Like that's like a big no-no. And I had a bunch of friends growing up who grew up in the same synagogue, same community as I did, and couldn't find rabbis to officiate their weddings. And that was part of what drew me to my work. Like that seems ridiculous to me. Like, of course you should have a rabbi to celebrate you and honor you and help make you married, right? And so my upbringing was like very focused on like don't like you have to marry a nice Jewish man, like marry a nice rich Jewish man, especially because then he'll take care of you. And so that message was like really embedded in my brain. I feel like the message you got was a little bit flipped. I don't know if you want to speak to that. If you want me to, you just got quiet. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I see it differently.
Okay.
So, do you have more? Yeah. Yeah.
So I am curious, let me see. Yeah, remove spotlight. Okay, good. What questions do you all have for each other, and including from our co-creators here in the sort of audience, but I would rather think of them as collaborators and co-creators. Is there any questions that you have for our panelists or panelists that you all are curious about having a conversation in this way? What feels alive for folks right now that you're curious about?
So I think we probably have the youngest children in the group, and so I would love to hear from the other couples about how you're instilling the variety of traditions within your kids, or if you are, like, just would love to hear a bit about that.
We can jump in on that one just because I resonated a lot with what you mentioned about just having the many different tools for us to reach God, or to respond to how God is present in the world. And so yeah, I with a dominant faith tradition like Christianity, um there was a lot of work that I needed to do to deconstruct exclusivist beliefs. And I like to kid that there were 3 sermons that I preached right before Park Avenue affirmed me as one of the pastors. And they were like 3 tenets that I still hold to. The first one was foundationally anti-racist, unapologetically pro Black Jesus. And the second one, it was during the time, not unlike the anniversary of 2 years ago when Roe v. Wade was struck down, but it was, you'll remember this, Kim, I believe, because you were in legislation then, the cardiac movement, fetal cardiac movement bill was I don't, was it passed? It was it was passed. And so it was a theology of pro bodily consent. And then the final one, and the one that maybe I think at the time we thought was like the one that was maybe gonna shift the tides with my own affirmation as a pastor, but it was no evangelism ever. And evangelism being a function as it is of colonization, and rooted in the doctrine of discovery. And so when it comes to the Christian tradition, I do think there's a lot to unpack. Let's say that's a kind way to do it. I like to say, if you're an evangelist, drop evangelism, and then it turns out a lot of people might come out of the woodwork, because it's just a not winning scenario, and it's limiting in so many ways. And so when it comes to our own children and the decisions we've made, we don't have we haven't always had all the agency to make those decisions. And actually that has led us incredibly and beautifully down a pathway of children. And I think we're all here with this, that like children are whole people. And sometimes we look at the ways that our oldest son is, and we're like, you're so Jewish, like you're gonna love Judaism, like the rule, this is the rule, and this is what you do, and you can just do that, you don't have to think about any of the things. And other times I'm like, it's just like this, and you could be more creative, or maybe not more creative, but expressive in this, like connection with God kind of thing. But yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and a yes both, and an all to every. And it reminds me of that poem that is, what is the posture of God toward us, and it's yes, yes, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna add that we parent our kids with a lot of humor too. And there was a brief period of time when Luis was 3, when he was beginning to wrap his head around, Da is Christian, Mommy is Jewish. Our all of our kids have come to us with a religion or a family religious tradition that is distinct from ours. And so, we honor that. And his family of origin is Christian. So it was, I am Christian. And then for a very brief period of time, we had a child in our home whose name was Christian.
Which was confusing.
So at age 3, Luis was, I am
Christian.
not what?
Yeah. That concretism is real.
Trina and Kim, anything you want to add on to this?
No, I mean, it's helpful just to hear. Just, I think about often I'm trying to raise like the best little Muslim boys that I possibly can, because I feel like Christianity is so dominant that they'll catch on like that. I'll have to like work hard at that and in the same or intentionally in the same way because it's just like in the air. But I love hearing how you all are thoughtful about it.
I think it's funny. I have never heard you say that out loud, that you're raising Muslim boys. Like they are.
They're Christian too, though.
But they are like, I will definitely, yeah. Yeah. I try to teach Reese to pray, but like, he's so excited that like Christmas is Jesus's birthday. And happy birthday is the highest compliment that he gives people. Like when he's happy for you, he says happy birthday. So like Christmas is definitely a birthday cake with candles, right? Like, and we've only had one Christmas with him, but he was like live and ready to go with like, where is Jesus? Because we had hats on, like we had candles, we had the horns, everything, because Christmas was a birthday party. And as far as he knows, it's Jesus's birthday. Like, and he was like, when is Jesus coming? Because we have a party. So, and I was like,
Awesome. I want to pause and see if there's any last questions from maybe any of our community. Rebecca Leary says, let's see. My parents were in an interfaith couple, and I have known many interfaith couples, and it seems to work best when the depth of practice, regardless of the label, is well matched. Do you all start with the same depth of practice? And did you all start with the same depth of practice and belief?
I would say that we had a lot of similarities, and even the choice to be like educated in your in your faith tradition and to become a professional, Jew and Christian, like that's a lot. That's you're diving in, and it's a particular, and it's also kind of, as has been said, it's a bit of a liability in kind of your spiritual wellness when you step into that leadership. So I think we continue to learn about that, but certainly, yeah, a lot of similar practices, a lot, yeah, shared interests.
I wonder if it's okay if we stop there. And here, my invitation, and y'all can, again, you can choose to accept this or not. It's been such a blessing to hear your journeys and your stories and your deep connection to faith and God and each other is really like, my heart feels so warm. And I really wonder if each of you would be willing to offer a blessing. Like, what is the blessing for this community? And as queer Southern interfaith couples wanting to bring a blessing to the world, I wonder if you would each just take a moment and offer a blessing that it is for all of us. It's for each other. It's for, within your couple families, and it's for all of us. Does that feel, would everybody be willing to offer a blessing? Got blessings in your pockets? Yeah. Go ahead, Kim. I see you ready to unmute. If you're ready, go.
Oh, I'll jump in. I'll save you, Kim. I love just the idea of kind of benedictions and I do think maybe one of the results of Empire Christianity is that words seem to not matter, but I do think words have power. And so, my wish for families that are interested in, faith more broadly is just to find that actually God is around us. God is before us. God is beside us and beneath us, and to really seek out and find that abundance of an earth and creation and huge God that says yes to you and affirms you and delights in your peculiarities, say it, peculiarities. And 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 just that if we could really, really know that, and really know that each and every person is precious, um and everyone is a person that deserves and should have respect, love, wholeness, wellness, safety, um and yeah, just that we are all that. You are loved and so are they, everyone.
Man. Trina, Kim, you wanna? Trina, you got the pointed out. You got voluntold.
Yeah, I want to offer a blessing of a prayer that I offered recently. I wrote a prayer that I'll share here. And it's called a prayer. Oh, it doesn't off the screen. It's called a prayer for the politics of spirituality. Bismillah Rahman Rahim, in the name of Allah, the tenderly compassionate, infinitely loving. Remembering that the political is historical, may we go forward learning the legacies from which we emerged, interrupting and reforming our heritage of domination and exploitation, and strengthening our lineage of justice, compassion, and communal caring. Amin, Ashe, and let it be so. With the conviction that the political is material, may we use our power, resources, and spheres of influence to enact positive material change in the world around us and to disrupt destructive and extractive policies that benefit the few at the expense of the many. Amin, Ashe, and let it be so. And with the clarity that the political has always been spiritual, move us forward knowing that it is our spirits that instinctively hunger for justice and liberation. May we pursue our duty to feed it, slake its thirst, and satiate that desire until no soul on earth is hungry for freedom. Amin, Asheo, and let it be so.
Go ahead, Mercy. Got a blessing that you want to lift up?
I want to say amen to what's already been lifted up, and I want to do something a little different if it's okay with you. I kind of want to bless you, and in that, bless us all. Can I have your hands? I just want to offer my deep gratitude for being on this path with you and the chance to celebrate our shared life together and the ways that God continues to draw us together and strengthen us for the lows and connecting us and sustaining us with the highs. And you know, looking to all of you, just grateful for this space to continue to explore and try to put words to these mysteries that we're living out, and just grateful for that curiosity that lives in us about how each of us lives and how each of us prays. And thinking about this theme, what pathways to progress, and just the ways that the internal skills of opening our hearts and trusting, having courage to step into messy and vulnerable, challenging spaces, and I would pray that these relationships, these families, we know that they're blessing the world in these communities. And I give thanks for Darcy and Amy and for Trina and Kim and all these babies and all these communities, and for Mackenzie, the work of Sojourn, Compassion Atlanta. And we're not perfect, and we're going to continue to stumble through this. And I think creating these spaces is part of that. So blessed be. Amen.
Amen, friends. Amen. Thank you so much, folks. Let's give them some beautiful, beautiful round of applause, all of that. Thank you so much for sharing your hearts and souls with us, your journey. We will be posting this on the website for other people to share and learn from. And just with all honor to all of the generations who brought us to this moment where we could have these conversations, I give thanks to all of those who walked before us that brought us to this moment, in their joy and their pain and their suffering and their aliveness and their messy human imperfection that allowed us to get to this moment. So Leanne is here. She is the interim executive director of Sojourn. She is behind the scenes. And I also want to honor our board member, Rebecca Leary Saffon. And most of all, I want to honor those of y'all who came to share with us this evening. And thank you once again to our magnificent, magnificent panelists. Thank you. It has been truly a pleasure. And with that, we are complete.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you, Leticia. Happy
Good to
birthday.
see you.